Seiya woke up early, as usual, in the usual comfort of their home. Haruko was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the space. Their life was stable and calm. They had lived together for 6 years, and although the passionate emotions of the early years had long faded, they remained good partners. But lately, Seiya felt more and more often that something was missing from this comfort. During breakfast, Haruko mentioned that her friend Mai would be visiting them tomorrow. "She's back in town and would like to see you. You two used to meet, but it was a long time ago," Haruko said with a small smile. Seiya didn't remember much about Mai, other than that she was one of Haruko's closest friends since high school. He just nodded, returning to his thoughts. Lately, he was having a hard time focusing on anything in particular. The mundane was consuming him, and even his conversations with Haruko seemed formal rather than sincere. The next evening, when Mai crossed the threshold of their house, the atmosphere changed. She was bright, confident, and radiated a kind of relaxed energy. Mai hugged Haruko and then held out her hand to Seiya. "We've met before, but you probably don't remember me," she said, smiling. During dinner, Mai told stories about her travels and work. Her voice, manner of speaking, and sincerity mesmerized Seiya. She was not at all like Haruko, more emotional, lively, open. Her jokes made even him laugh, though he rarely allowed himself such levity. After Mai left, Haruko was clearly happy. "She's gorgeous, isn't she? Always has been." Seiya nodded but didn't answer. His thoughts were occupied by Mai. Her smile, her look, her laugh stayed with him even when he went to bed that night. It was the first night in a long time that he couldn't sleep. He realized that something had appeared in his seemingly stable and predictable life that made his heart beat faster. The next day, thoughts about Mai did not leave Seiya. He tried to focus on his work, but her image kept popping up in his mind. He remembered her voice, her smile, her confidence and ease. Something in her touched him in a way that nothing and no one had touched him for a long time. When he returned home in the evening, Haruko was sitting in the living room reading a book. She looked calm, even happy. "Mai wrote me today, thanking me for dinner," she said, not taking her eyes off the pages. "She wants to invite us both over next week." "That's great," Seiya replied, trying to sound nonchalant. But his heart began to beat faster. He was afraid of this feeling, afraid of himself. A few days passed, but each of them seemed long and stressful to Seiya. He felt that something had changed in him after that dinner, and though he tried to avoid those thoughts, they were too strong to ignore. When the evening of Mai's meeting arrived, Seiya felt strangely excited. Haruko was in a great mood, joking and looking happy, while he was silent, lost in his thoughts. Mai met them in her apartment, which was as bright and stylish as herself. Everything was thought out down to the smallest detail: light music, glasses of wine, and exquisite dinner. Her presence once again captured Seiya's attention. Was she laughing, telling stories, staring into his eyes a little longer than necessary? Or was it just his imagination? After dinner, Mai offered to show them the new painting she had bought. Haruko, interested, followed her to another room, while Seiya stayed in the living room. For a moment he felt himself breathing more freely. But this silence did not last long. Mai returned to him alone, with a glass of wine in her hands. "Did you enjoy your dinner?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "Yes, you organized everything perfectly," he replied, trying to look calm. "I'm glad you liked it," she replied, looking him straight in the eyes. Her gaze was too piercing, too frank. At that moment, something changed in the air. Seiya felt his heart beat faster, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. Before turning back to Haruko, Mai just gently touched his hand and said, "Relax, you look too tense." Her touch was brief, but it left a mark Seiya couldn't forget. That evening, when he returned home, he knew that now everything would change. He didn't want to admit it, but Mai had become more than just his wife's friend to him. The next few days were stressful for Seiya. He tried to act like he always did, but inside he felt something tearing him apart. He was aware that his thoughts about Mai were unacceptable, but he couldn't help himself. Everything he did seemed mechanical, as if life was passing him by. Haruko didn't seem to notice the change in his demeanor. She was busy with work and her affairs. Sometimes she mentioned Mai in conversations, but she did not see anything suspicious. One day she even said, "It's good that Mai is in our lives now. Have you noticed how cheerful she is? I always feel better around her." These words echoed painfully in Seiya. He felt that his guilt was becoming unbearable. A few days later, Mai called him herself. This was unexpected. They had only talked in Haruko's presence before. "Hi, this is Mai. I have a few ideas for a project, and I thought maybe you could help me out. You have experience in this field, don't you?" she said easily and casually. Seiya tried to find an excuse to refuse, but Mai insisted. "It won't take long. Just help me understand a few things. We can meet for coffee." He agreed, even though he knew it was a bad idea. Their meeting took place 2 days later in a small cafe in the city center. Mai was as easy and confident as ever. They talked about work, but gradually the topic turned to something more personal. "Are you happy?" she suddenly asked, looking him straight in the eyes. This question caught him off guard. He replied evasively, "I think I have what it takes." But Mai only smiled slightly. "You know, sometimes people seem to settle for what they have, even if it doesn't make them happy," she said, looking down. Her words remained in Seiya's mind like an echo. They parted ways that evening, but this meeting only changed his feelings for Mai even more. He now saw her not only as a charismatic and bright woman, but also as a person who understood him like no one else. At home, Seiya once again found himself in a silence that seemed even more oppressive. Haruko, as usual, sat on her own business and did not pay attention to his anxiety. He realized that he was attracted to Mai more and more, and something had to be done about it. But instead of severing that connection, he just waited for the next opportunity to see her. A few weeks passed, and Mai and Seiya began to see each other more and more often. Their meetings always seemed innocent. Sometimes work issues, sometimes helping with her projects, sometimes just coffee to discuss something interesting. But tension was growing between them, which they both tried to hide. One evening, when Seiya returned home, Haruko was busy preparing dinner. She was in high spirits and happily said, "I invited Mai to dinner on Saturday. It's been a long time since we all got together." Seiya tried not to show his excitement, but his heart began to beat faster. "Okay, that's a good idea," he said, though he was afraid inside. Meeting Mai in Haruko's presence seemed like something he couldn't bear. On Saturday, May came on time. She was as charming as ever, and Haruko welcomed her with a hug as if they hadn't seen each other in years. They sat down at the table, and the conversation flowed easily and casually. But every time Mai and Seiya met their eyes, there was a tension between them that they tried to hide. After dinner, Haruko suggested that Mai stay a little longer to drink tea. She went into the kitchen, leaving the two of them in the living room. For a moment, there was silence between them. "Do you find it hard to be around me?" Mai asked quietly, not looking at him. Seiya took a sip of his drink to buy time, but realized he couldn't lie anymore. "Yes," he admitted. Mai looked away and smiled a little. "Then why do you keep it up?" He didn't know what to say. His mind screamed that this was wrong, but his heart wanted to be with her. Before Haruko turned back, Mai added, "Maybe you should decide what you really want." Seiya lay awake for a long time that night. Mai's words haunted him. Decide what he wants? How is that possible? He had stability with Haruko, years of living together, mutual trust. But Mai seemed to be something he was missing, something he was even afraid to admit to himself. The next day he wrote her again. He understood that this was the wrong way, but he could no longer stop. Mai answered briefly, but warmly. She suggested meeting on neutral ground where they could talk frankly. When they met, Mai was calm and confident, but Seiya looked confused. He started to speak, but she cut him off. "I won't ask anything of you, Seiya, but you have to be honest with yourself. And with Haruko." Her words sounded like a challenge, and he realized that he could no longer live hiding his true feelings. But was he ready for the consequences? This question remained hanging in the air like a heavy burden. The following days became a real test for Seiya. He tried to act as if nothing had changed, but inside, he was feeling more and more broken. Every moment with Haruko felt like another blow to his conscience. She trusted him, loved him, and worst of all, she didn't suspect anything. One evening, as they sat together at dinner, Haruko happily talked about their plans for the near future. "Maybe we should go on vacation. We haven't been out in a while. This will be a good opportunity for both of us to relax." Seiya only nodded, but his silence visibly embarrassed Haruko. "You've been kind of distant lately," she said softly, looking into his eyes. I'm just tired, he dodged, but the words sounded too weak even for him. That night, Seiya decided he couldn't live like this anymore. He wrote Mai again, this time with the sole purpose of seeing each other and talking. She agreed, although she warned that such a conversation would not be easy for both of them. They met in a quiet park, far from human eyes. Mai looked serious, even a little tense. She knew that this meeting would not be easy. I can't hide anymore, Seiya said bluntly, not waiting for questions. And what do you plan to do? Mai asked, looking at him intently. I want to be with you, he admitted, looking down. Mai was silent for a long time. Then she sighed and said, But what about Haruko? Have you thought about that? She doesn't deserve to be betrayed. I know, and it's destroying me. But I can't lie to her or myself anymore. My feelings for her aren't what they used to be. With you, I feel something real, something I haven't felt in a long time. Mai thought for a moment before quietly answering, If you decide to do this, you should be prepared for the consequences. This is not a game, Seiya. You will ruin her life and possibly your own. He nodded, realizing her words, but he couldn't stop anymore. He decided to talk to Haruko the next evening. She was cooking dinner when he approached her. Haruko, we need to talk, he said, his voice sounding so serious that she immediately turned around. What happened? She asked, holding a kitchen knife in her hands. It's hard for me to say this, but I can't hide the truth anymore. I've fallen in love with another person. His words sounded like a blow. Haruko froze, not believing her ears. She put the knife on the table and turned to him. Her eyes filled with tears. Are you serious? She asked, trying to hold on. Yes, I didn't mean for this to happen, but I can't lie to you and myself anymore, he said, even though everything inside was clenching in pain. Haruko took a few steps back and was silent, looking at him. Then she smiled bitterly. Mai. It's Mai, right? Seiya didn't answer, but she already understood everything. I trusted you. I trusted her. And this is how you thank me for all these years. Her voice trembled with resentment and pain. He could not answer anything. Haruko turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving him standing in the middle of the kitchen. It had been a long night for both of them. Haruko was crying outside the bedroom door, and Seiya was sitting on the couch, realizing that there was no going back to his ex. The next day, he began to pack his things. The next morning, there was silence in the house, so heavy that it seemed as if the air had become thicker. Seiya tried to gather his things, but every item in this house brought back a wave of memories. Photographs, books, even ordinary little things reminded of the life that he destroyed with his decision. Haruko did not leave the room. He knew she was there, but he didn't dare go to her. The words they had exchanged the day before were too painful to try to say again now. When Seiya finished packing, he left a note on the kitchen table. Haruko, forgive me for everything. I know it won't change anything, but I really cherished every moment I had with you. You didn't deserve this, and I will always be guilty of it. I'm leaving now so I don't do any more pain. He left without looking back. Seiya moved to Mai the same day. Her apartment was completely different from the house he lived in with Haruko. Spacious, stylish, but cold, without the warmth he felt at home. Mai greeted him with understanding, but there was some tension between them. Did you do everything? She asked as she accepted his things. Yes, she knows now, Seiya replied, avoiding her gaze. Mai tried to act calm, but she couldn't hide her anxiety. Seiya, do you understand that things have changed now? It won't be easy. I know, he said, but he wasn't sure of it himself. The first days of life together were strange. Mai tried to support Seiya, but their conversation seemed short and superficial. He felt guilty for Haruko, and at the same time confused that he now had to build a new life with Mai. One evening, sitting at dinner, Mai broke the silence. Do you regret what you did? Seiya looked up at her. I don't know. I can't say I don't love you, but at the same time I feel like I ruined something very important. Mai sighed. You have to understand that things are different now. We're together, but we're both going to have to live with what happened. It's not going to be easy, especially for you. Seiya nodded, but Mai's words only highlighted his inner struggle. He felt as if he was torn between the past and the present, and he didn't know if he could ever find peace again. Meanwhile, Haruko began to rebuild her life. At first, it was difficult. Her days were filled with tears, anger, and loneliness. She avoided mutual acquaintances, fearing questions and sympathetic looks. But over time, she realized that she had to live on. She began to devote more time to herself, return to her hobbies, which she had long put aside due to marriage. She even started talking to new people, and it gave her a sense of freedom. Several months have passed. Seiya and Mai were still together, but their life was not the ideal he had imagined. The constant feeling of guilt, condemnation from the environment, and the tension between them became stronger. One evening, as they sat in silence, Mai finally said, "Maybe we made a mistake, Seiya. I don't know if I can be the person to make you happy." These words were like a cold shower for him. He realized that perhaps their story was doomed from the start. Seiya remained silent, but inside, he felt that he was finally faced with a question he could no longer ignore. Had he really chosen the right path by abandoning everything for Mai? Life with Mai, which seemed to Seiya to be the beginning of a new, happy chapter, quickly turned out to be completely different. At first, everything went well. They laughed, spent time together, and it seemed that their feelings were genuine. But after a few weeks, when the euphoria of the initial emotions wore off, Seiya began to notice reality. Mai was different from Haruko, and that's what once attracted him. But now these differences began to seem less exciting to him. She was more independent, less caring, and often seemed to be living her own life even around him. She didn't try to accommodate him or create the comfort of home he was used to with Haruko. Her apartment was cold, modern, lacking the warmth that Seiya had always felt in his former home. One evening, after a long day at work, Seiya came home exhausted. Mai was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine and a phone in her hands. "You look terrible," she joked without even looking up. "Thank you for your support," he replied, trying to smile, but he could feel how bitter it sounded. He went to the kitchen, but there was neither the smell of food nor the usual order. Mai rarely cooked, and if she did, it was only for herself. "We could order something," she said, not even offering to help him relax after a hard day. It was a little thing, but there were more and more such little things. Their conversations were short, and sometimes stopped altogether. Seiya began to notice that Mai was often aloof. She could sit on the phone for hours or go to meetings with friends, not always even letting him know about it. One day, when she returned late at night, he asked, "Where have you been? Why didn't you say you would stay?" Mai looked at him with slight annoyance. "Seiya, you are not my bodyguard. I was with friends. Why are you so concerned?" "I just wanted to know. We live together now," he tried to explain, but her answer sounded sharp. "We live together, but that doesn't mean I have to report on my every move." These words hit him like a knife in the heart. Every day he felt more and more alone, even though they lived under the same roof. He began to be tormented by memories of his life with Haruko. He remembered how she always waited for him at home, how she cooked his favorite meals, how she could just sit next to him and listen when he was having a hard time. Her care and attention, which had once seemed familiar, now seemed unattainable. One day, when he was alone at home, he chanced upon an old letter in his belongings. It was a note from Haruko that she had left for him a few years ago. "Seiya, you are the best thing that happened in my life. Thank you for always being there. I love you." These words broke him. He realized that he had lost not only Haruko, but also himself. He was unhappy, torn between the past and the present. Life with Mai no longer seemed like a choice that would bring him happiness. It had become just another source of pain. Only now he realized that this pain was his own creation. Seiya began to avoid Mai. They became almost strangers, even living together. He left home early, returned late, trying to fill the void in his soul with work. But it didn't help. Every evening, coming to the apartment, which was more like a hotel, he asked himself, "Why did I do this? What was I looking for?" There was no answer. After a few months of living like this, Seiya realized that he couldn't keep deceiving himself anymore. He became the person he despised, confused, lonely, unable to take responsibility for his decisions. Mai, who had once been a source of new life for him, now seemed only a reflection of his own mistakes. One evening, he was sitting on the sofa in a dark room, looking at pictures from when he and Haruko were happy together. He remembered her laugh, her care, how she always tried to support him even in the most difficult moments. Now he realized how much he had devalued all this. Taking courage, Seiya decided that he had to talk to Haruko. He knew he had no right to expect forgiveness, but at least he wanted to apologize to her. He was filled with fear. What if she didn't even want to listen to him? But he understood that he could not live on without taking this step. The next day, gathering his spirits, Seiya drove to their old house. He paused at the door, hesitating. The feeling that he had no right to be here anymore was suffocating him, but he pulled himself together and rang the bell. The door opened, and Haruko appeared before him. She looked calm, even stronger than he remembered. There was no sign of weakness on her face, just a slight look of surprise. "Seiya?" she said, holding back her emotions. "Haruko, I need to talk to you. Please listen to me." His voice was shaking, and he couldn't look her in the eyes. Haruko stood in silence for a while, then nodded and left, letting him into the house. They sat down in the living room, and Seiya couldn't help but notice how much things had changed. Her things became different. The atmosphere was not the same as before. It was already her home without him. "Say," Haruko said shortly, crossing her arms over her chest. Seiya took a deep breath. "I know my words won't fix what I've done, but I have to say this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I've ruined. I know I've lost the best thing in my life. You. You was the one who always supported me, who loved me, and I betrayed you, betrayed our trust." She was silent, but he could see her eyes filling with tears. "I'm not asking you to take me back. I know I ruined everything we had, but I want you to know. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner," he continued. Haruko sat in silence for a few minutes, looking at him. Then she replied, "Seiya, I don't know what to say. You caused me pain I never expected. I loved you, I trusted you, and you destroyed everything." He nodded, having nothing to object to. "But," she continued, "in these months, I realized that I can live without you. It was hard, but I did it. You came here to apologize, and I appreciate it, but I don't know if I will ever be able to will ever trust you again." Seiya lowered his head, feeling his heart sink. "I'm not asking you to," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I owe you the rest of my life." Haruko took a breath, wiped away her tears, and replied, "Maybe one day I can forgive you. But right now, I just want to get on with my life." He nodded, realizing it was better than he could have hoped for. "Thank you for listening to me," he said, standing up. "Seiya," Haruko stopped him before he left. "You have to understand that forgiveness goes a long way, not only from me, but from yourself as well." He nodded and walked out of the house without turning around, knowing that this was only the first step to atone for his guilt. Seiya stood in the doorway, ready to take the last step to leave the house. His heart was heavy, but he was relieved to finally say all he had to say. He reached for the doorknob when he suddenly heard a thin, ringing voice behind him. "Mom, who is it?" Seiya froze. He slowly turned around, and there was a boy standing in front of him. He looked about 5 years old. Big, slightly surprised eyes were looking at Seiya, and the boy was holding a small toy car in his hands. Seiya felt the ground giving way from under his feet. His gaze darted to Haruko, who was standing a little further away, her face tense and frozen. "Mother?" The boy came closer to her, hiding behind her leg, but did not stop looking at Seiya. "Haruko," Seiya whispered, not believing his eyes. Is this my son?" Haruko looked away for a moment, but then looked directly into his eyes. Her voice was calm but firm. "Yes, Seiya, this is your son. His name is Ryu." Seiya felt his heart sink. He slowly dropped to his knees, unable to take his eyes off the boy. Ryu looked at him curiously, but warily at the same time. Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, looking up at Haruko. "You left then. You made your choice," she replied, trying to stay calm. "I didn't want you to come back out of obligation or guilt. I wanted you to live your life." I didn't know," Seiya said, unable to find the right words. His gaze fell back on Ryu. "Hello, Ryu?" he said softly. The boy looked at him a little warily. "Who are you?" Seiya held his breath for a moment before softly answering. I'm your dad." Ryu looked surprised, but said nothing. He just stared at Seiya as if trying to figure out if it was true. Haruko took a step forward, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Ryu, go to your room, okay? I'll be right back. Ryu nodded and disappeared down the hall, glancing back at Seiya from time to time. When they were alone, Seiya moved closer to Haruko. His voice was full of pain and remorse. I didn't even know. I should have been here. I should have been there for you. Haruko held firm. Seiya, you made a choice. You left. And that's when I decided I could do without you. You weren't a part of his life, and now he doesn't even know who you are. I want to change that, he said, looking her straight in the eyes. I want to be his father, and if possible, I want to try to fix everything I've ruined. Haruko was silent for a long time. She knew those words could be sincere, but she remembered all the pain he had caused her. It's not that simple, Seiya, she finally said. You can't just go back and expect things to be the same. Ryu doesn't know you. I don't know if I can trust you, but if you really want to be a part of his life, you have to prove it. I will do whatever it takes, he said firmly. Okay, she replied after a long pause. But not for me, but for him. You have to start small. He doesn't know you, and you have to earn his trust. Seiya nodded. He knew the road would be long and hard, but now he had a goal, to right his wrongs and become what he was supposed to be from the beginning, a father to his son, and maybe a significant other to Haruko again. Seiya couldn't sleep that night. The mention of his son, about his son, did not leave his head. He felt the bitter shame and pain of missing those 5 years of not being around Ryu when he was growing up. But at the same time, he had hope. Maybe it's not too late to fix everything. The next day, he called Haruko. Her voice sounded restrained, but she accepted his offer to see Ryu. Okay, she said, but don't expect too much from him. He's still small and doesn't know anything about you.